The Constitution is the basic framework on which the United States is based. It tells the government how it's supposed to run, and it tells the people their rights. I am David Muncie, and I'll be looking at constitutional rights in disaster policies. I will review applicable constitutional amendments when it comes to emergency situations. I will look into martial law and the writ of habeas corpus. I will review the Posse Comitatus Act, and also look at some government infractions over history of these emergency laws and amendments. Some constitutional amendments applicable to emergency situations. We'll start with the First Amendment, which guarantees the rights of free expression and action that are fundamental to a democratic government. These rights include the freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. As stated in the Constitution, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Other constitutional amendments applicable to an emergency situation is the 10th Amendment, which gives the states its powers. As stated in the Constitution, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This is where we get our bottom-up structure when it comes to emergency situations, as the states have the power to keep people safe. Also, there's the 14th Amendment, also known as the Due Process Clause, and this prohibits state and local government officials from depriving persons of life, liberty, or property without legislative authorization. Martial law is a military government involving the suspension of ordinary law. We see this in many countries around the world where there is civil unrest. There's also the writ of habeas corpus, which is a court order to a person or agency holding someone in custody, such as a warden, to deliver the imprisoned individual to the court issuing the order and to show a valid reason for the person's detention. This prevents unlawful imprisonment. Suspensions mostly occur during times of societal unrest or insurrection. This was only used once by the U.S. federal government by Abraham Lincoln. Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution states, "Writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended except in cases of invasion or rebellion where public safety requires it." The Posse Comitatus Act limits the use of the military by the federal government. This does not include the National Guard under state control, and this is why we see governors able to use the National Guard in natural disasters or law enforcement. This also does not include the United States Coast Guard, as they fill a law enforcement role under the Department of Homeland Security. Some government infractions of the previous stated amendments laws that pertain to emergency situations. We'll start with Abraham Lincoln in 1863, where he suspended habeas corpus, and it was imposed on POW spies and enemy sympathizers during the Civil War. This was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. During Hurricane Katrina, guns were confiscated in New Orleans. This was also ruled constitutional and forced the passage of the Disaster Recovery Personal Protection Act to prevent such seizures during disaster situations. Finally, in 1957, President Eisenhower sent troops to enforce the Arkansas school desegregation. This violated Posse Comitatus, but was originally justified by the President via the Enforcement Acts, which stated, "Military can be called up when states can't or won't suppress violence affecting constitutional rights of the people." In summary, I have reviewed applicable constitutional amendments when it pertains to emergency situations. I looked at martial law and the writ of habeas corpus. I reviewed the Posse Comitatus Act and looked over government infractions of applicable laws and amendments to the Constitution during emergency situations. I hope you found this informative and you learned something, and I look forward to your comments. This was a Dave Muncy production.